welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Faith Garnett. I am a member of the Organizational Effectiveness Practice Area here at Community Science, where I integrate conflict resolution, cross-cultural understanding, and strategic communications with qualitative and mixed methods research to help organizations navigate complexity and develop equitable data-driven strategies. Additionally, through facilitation, technical assistance, and coaching, I support leaders in creating learning opportunities, enhancing their collaboration, and driving systems level change. For those new to us, Community Science is an award-winning research and development organization that partners with governments, foundations, and nonprofits to advance solutions to social problems through community and systems change, fostering continuous learning, and building capacity for social impact. Today, I am very excited to be joined by my colleague, Dr. Jasmine Williams-Washington, who brings both lived and professional experience to the work of community building, organizing, and activist work. I'm honored to learn from you today, Jasmine, and I'll allow you to introduce yourself now.
Thank you so much, Faith. Again, I am Jasmine Williams Washington, and I serve as a Director of Organizational Effectiveness and Power Building Work here at Community Science. My work focuses on helping organizations and communities move from traditional capacity building to what I like to call power-centered capacity building work, as well as supporting organizations to support communities in what we call community-driven systems change work. And that work centers trust, relationships, and shared ownerships over outcomes. Before I ever started consulting work, I was and still am a community organizer, and I bring that approach into everything I do. It means leading with deep respect, community wisdom, collective action, and the belief that those most impacted should lead solutions. I also co-authored the blog Six Trauma Informed Practices that build trust and shift power in community engagement with my colleague Mariah Laird, who's not with us today, but definitely with us in spirit and expertise, which really captures how we approach this work. And for us, I think I can speak with her when I say trauma informed practice isn't just a checklist. It's a way of showing up with honesty, accountability, and care that builds a foundation for true partnership. And at its core, my work is about helping people and systems move from power over to power with so communities can lead, imagine, and sustain change they always envision. So thank you, Faith, for having me today.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing in the blog that you and Mariah Laird authored together. So today's conversation does build on those ideas that you explored there by thinking about power-centered community building and what that looks like in practice on a day-to-day basis. Thinking about how communities reclaim agency, nurture trust, and sustain healing and interdependence as part of collective power and what that looks like. And so the intent of today's discussion is to prompt reflection, storytelling, and then also thinking about how your experience also connects to your broader vision for equitable community-led change. And so with that, let us jump right in. To start us out, and again, to bring back in the blog, you wrote that real engagement isn't just about showing up. It's about how we show up and who we center when we do. When you think about community power building, what does showing up well really look like? And to build on that, how can communities lead and shape the pace and tone of engagement rather than just responding to it?
Thank you for that question. When I think about what it means to show up well, it really means being intentional about how and why. Again, how and why we are entering community spaces. It's about leading with humility. Um, Often you mentioned doctor, right? And that comes with power within itself, having that title and power dynamics immediately with leading with doctor. And when I come into a a space. I'm just Jasmine, right? So that they're alone saying, "Hi, I'm Jasmine." That's being humble, right? And recognizing that that title means nothing. uh, when you're coming into a space that you're not a part of, you're not of that community. You're asking permission to be a part and being of that space. And you're asking people to share their lived experiences with you and permission to be a part and walk alongside them. So it's about leading with humility, being clear about the power we hold, and everyone holds some kind of power, and being ready to shift that power when needed. When we think about engagement, too often engagement looks like institutions inviting people into preset processes, right? But showing up well means letting communities set the rhythm and tone themselves. And so, as consultants, so you know this, Faith, right? So, as consultants, we may think one thing going into a space, and oftentimes things never go as we intend for them to go. Our work in Schenectady, for example, um, with the Community Change Council, I went in thinking one way of what progress would look like. Um, and things totally changed. It didn't go as intended. They defined the pace and the process. The resident leaders led that rhythm, and actually, it built trust and stronger outcomes, in my view, over time. And they're still moving together today. That 90 days of action, that process, it did go through, and that systems change did happen. Uh, and we did have that proof of concept. Not necessarily what I thought it would be, but it was what it needed to be. So showing up well isn't just about being present. It's about our posture. Are we centering connection or and shared purpose, or are we centering control? Okay. And in my view, centering shared purpose and connection is much more important than centering control.
Thank you so much for just shedding light on that and so many other things in your response. You took us in a bunch of different directions to help us better understand, what that means to show up well. If you are an outsider going into a community and wanting to do the work around organizing activism and systems change, and you brought up power and intentionality, which are both important things to be aware of, especially when we think about how power has been wielded in communities in a way that has caused harm. And so, speaking of harm, in the blog, you emphasize that acknowledging harm is actually a part of how trust begins. And so, when you think about your own experience, whether it be in Schenectady or just doing this work for decades, what does repair look like at the community? And that was.
Oh, Faith. Oh my goodness. You're aging
I'm
me.
just
Oh my goodness.
I'm not age. I'm just
Decades.
I'm letting the people know that you are
I've
not
been
new
doing
to
this
this,
for
but
I'm
that
not
you're
new to
true to
this.
it.
True. I'm true
That's
to it.
right.
That's for sure.
That's right. That was a plug. Um, but what does repair look like at the community level, especially when residents are, navigating generational harm,
Mhm.
or when
Mhm.
they look around them and they can see ongoing disinvestment? What
Mhm.
does it look like to repair and build trust in that sense?
Repair and acknowledging harm, like that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. Repair always starts with acknowledgement. So, not just that the harm happened, but why and what conditions allowed it to continue to show up. And when I say us, Faith, I mean consultants, right? Going into community, whether it's a consultant, whether you are a government entity, whether you are a funder, whether you are um, intermediary, whether you are a nonprofit, whomever, whatever you represent, working with
Mhm.
community, you have to understand that when working with community, there may be trauma and repair that you may have not had anything to do with, right? Um, but there's trauma and a repair that needs to happen there. Maybe this community has had some kind of harm in the past that they've experienced working with another consultant. I remember being in grad school and doing, community surveys and going knocking on the doors and being told by graduate uh, school professor being told, do not wear the university shirt because they would say, hey, here y'all come again. You're coming in to collect surveys, but you never come back and you don't do anything, right?
Mhm.
Or like
Yeah.
there's trauma in that, there's harm in that, right? And even though you did not do it, you were not a part of that, and you could be doing something totally different. Repair always starts at the acknowledgement,
Mhm.
not just that harm happened, but why it happened. I understand acknowledging, like, yep, that has happened. And yes, acknowledging why it happened and why it continues to happen, why it continues to show up. So when communities have faced decades of disinvestment, repair can be repair can't be seen as a one-time apology or even a short-term grant cycle for funders, right? Like, oh, this community has seen that, years and years of disinvestment. So what we're going to do, we're going to throw money at it, right? Or do something else. We're going to do this, whatever the thing is. It has to be relational and it has to be ongoing because, as you've heard me say many times, Faith, every interaction with the community is a deposit in that trust bank.
Mhm.
Every interaction, you have two choices. You can make a deposit or you're going to make a withdrawal. It's your choice. Okay. And so repair starts with the acknowledgement, and repair ongoing has to be relational and it's ongoing. So it happens with acknowledgement, not just that it happens, but why and why it continues to happen, whether it was you, whether it was your organization, whether it even happened before you were born. Speaking of me being not new to this, but true to this, things have happened before I was even born, right? And I have to acknowledge that fact and also acknowledge the conditions as to why these things continue to happen. We recently worked with a client where we saw what that looked like in practice, where trust was strained between intermediary and uh, their clientele, providing support to resident leaders. And we facilitated what we called repair conversations. And the goals wasn't to fix people. It was to rebuild the right relationship so that they could move forward. Um, and we made space for them to name the harm and revisit the agreement so that they could move forward and continue to work together their their mission together, right? So they were able to put their emotional honesty right next to the
Mhm.
operational fixes there, and so ultimately that real repair was able to happen when both sides were able to understand that accountability wasn't a punishment. It doesn't mean accountability is a punishment, it's shared responsibility. And so accountability is also important. And so when you're repairing, repair looks different depending on the it.
Mhm.
So if the person or the entity that has done the harm is also present, right? Accountability is a part of that conversation versus when they're not.
Mhm.
So well, it's not so, and all of these things are important. But repair and acknowledgement of harm and accountability, all these things go one for one. But well, and it's all important to move forward. And even still, it's relational, it's ongoing,
Yeah.
and you can make a deposit or you can make a withdrawal. It's your choice.
Yeah, thank you for helping us understand that it's not one dimensional, but it really does, going back to intentionality where you started out, being intentional about
Hmm.
acknowledgement, doing the work that may be required, thinking about optics and power differences and who's showing up to do that acknowledgement and all of those things. I appreciate you walking us through that. I want to take us to one more question before allowing you to share with us what you think is next on the horizon for this work. But before that, in the piece, you emphasize giving people real agency, and not even giving, but allowing people to step in. Well, let me use a different word choice. In the piece, you emphasize making sure that people feel that they can step into their own agency, power, voice, and choice and how they participate. What have you seen communities do to define engagement on their own terms in ways that affirm their autonomy while still nurturing the collective action and the collective responsibility of their engagement as a group?
Hmm. Uh, I think I still go back to Schenectady again. I think about Schenectady. I think about Fresno. I work in Fresno. Um, I think I really it goes back to our community driven systems change strategy work coming to life with structures like the Community Change Council um, in Schenectady, um, where the council was, of course, a part of a larger effort to make sure residents weren't just s- centered in decisions, that they shared power in shaping
Mhm,
what the decisions were, um, where they set an agenda. They were a part of setting the agenda, saying, this is what we are even going to do, where we
mhm,
were not a part of that, um, where we were the capacity piece, right? If that makes sense, where we were
mhm,
the ones providing support to say this is what systems change is, and like, well, wait, pause a little bit, is this really system change? And more so asking questions and clarifying to make sure they stayed on track. And when I say on track, it's not that it was wrong, but the framing was appropriate for a systemic win, that it wasn't necessarily, an output, or that it was going to get the outcome of a systemic win. Um, Therefore, unlocking that capacity for that those resident leaders.
mhm,
So they shared power in shaping what the it was. Um, Also, in guiding those priorities together, uh, and that they didn't have a seat at the table; they were the table. They didn't have a seat at the table; they were the table, where they invited the funders, and institutional partners into their process, and it wasn't the other way around.
mhm,
And so that approach shifted the engagement from a consultation. If you're familiar with like the ladder of engagement, if Sherry Arnstein's, if you're familiar with like the traditional ladder of community engagement, where you have like tokenism and consultation and collaboration, more to like a collaborative approach. From participation to ownership, where
mhm,
community, when residents actually own that space. And that's what it means to really practice at a community level, system change, ownership at a community level, and having that level of autonomy there is creating like that the ecosystem, the architecture, to how decisions are really made and owned by community.
Mhm.
And we, in our work and faith, you hear this all the time. We say this a lot, especially if you feel like, community and residents are experts in their own experience. That was a living embodiment of what that meant, where they were not just influencing the outcomes, they owned it. This
Mhm.
is where it came, they named the issue and they also named the solution. And they're still working on those things today. And so when communities are able to actually define the engagement so that it works for them on their own terms, they also build in what accountability and solidarity looks like. And it lasts, it's more sustainable, versus something that's more prescriptive
Mhm.
and put on them. And again, you know my line, Faith. It's a lot easier when you do things with versus to. I'm doing things with you and not to you. Do things with community and not to community. Um, it's not at that point. It's not just engagement. It's more transformative. It's transformation.
Yeah.
That's what power looks like.
And I was going to say that is powerful, just the example that you gave and the metaphor even of the community being the table. And so they themselves were the table and not the other way around.
Right.
And, it's important for those kinds of stories and experiences to be shared to help us to just have a better understanding of what's possible in doing this work because it's been done before at different levels across the country. And, the role of facilitator or funder or whoever the entity might be, being comfortable stepping in and stepping out and really taking the lead from those who are closest in proximity to whatever issue, opportunity area, or thing that is being worked out or collaborated on. And so, just, as a final closing reflection, as you look ahead, what gives you hope about where power-centered community building is headed? What shifts do you think are needed to sustain this work over the next decade? I see you smiling. What about this question is giving you pause? Do you have hope in where things are headed? I know that
I
there's a lot.
do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot. I think. I think for me, I have a very unique background, Faith, where I introduce myself. I'm an organizer that just so happens to have a PhD, and so it's a lot easier for me to trust community because I've been in community. Um, I think to do this work, you have to trust community, truly trust community, and have some humility. So I'm not saying that everyone that does this work and leads this work has to be a community organizer. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you should have a level of humility, um, truly, and not just say it. And there's a lot of self reflecting work. I've not done true organizing for a few years now. And so I have to often check myself and check my own assumptions, but that is human work that I'm doing on a regular basis. And so I think those of us that are doing this work should really engage in that self reflection meaningfully in a deep way, um, because that's the only way that those of us doing this work can truly do it responsibly. Otherwise, we can do more harm than we can do good. That is my hope for those of us doing this work and my concern for us doing this work. Um, because the titles at times can get in the way. It can get in the way.
Mhm.
And so, and the titles also offer us, it's a a beautiful thing because it allows us to be a bridge. Our training allows us to be a bridge. And that is what we bring. That is the magic between us and like between institutions, funders, municipalities, the people. We are the bridge between community and insert whatever institution, community insert funder, community insert municipality, community insert whomever. But we're the bridge, we're the translator, we're the a lot of the things. And so that's the magic. But we also have to check ourselves.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate that. I was giving space just for any other comments you wanted to share on that note, but I think it's so powerful to be thinking about what we represent and how we show up and doing the personal work so that we are attuned to the needs, the requests, the things that community might want to share. And really thinking about positionality and power in that too. And so I appreciate ending on that reflective note. And I just appreciate generally having the opportunity for this conversation today. Thank you for sharing so deeply about your experience, the work that you do, who you are in the work that you do, and then what you see next on the horizon. So thank you again, Jasmine, for your time. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Faith, anytime.